Hi there, I'm Adam Dickin. I'm an engineer and someone who recently bought property in Catalonia. I found that the resources online weren't very good, so I'm hoping today to share some information with you to make your life a bit easier. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, I'm no legal expert, so all of this is simply casual advice from one friend to another. So hopefully I'm going to help guide you through the process, or at least give you a little bit more information about the process of buying property in Catalonia. Now, all of this is coming from the perspective of a British person buying in Catalonia. So if you're American, maybe there's some things that are similar, maybe there's some things that will help. With that said, let's get going. So first, I want to give you an overview of the entire timeline, and then from there, I want to go into the processes involved, and then finally share some tips with you. So I boiled this down to an 11-step process. So first, we need to plan. You need to work out what kind of life do you want in Catalonia. Do you want to live on the Costa Brava, or do you want to be in Barcelona city centre? Now, these are very different lifestyles. Once you know what you want, you need to get out there and search and see if there's anything that can align with what you're wanting. Then you need to go out there and visit the properties that you're interested in, make a short list, after which we need to start doing our diligence, both structurally and also legally speaking. Following that, hopefully you find your apartment of your dreams, and you can start to negotiate with the seller, try and work out a price. Following that, you would make a reservation. These aren't necessary, but there's an increasing trend of reservations. You then enter the PADAS phase, where you'll need to agree a private pre-purchase contract with the seller, which commonly there's a 10% deposit associated with this. After which, once that's signed, you can then sort out your finances. If you need a mortgage, you can apply for it. And then finally, the last step is the escritura, or what we call completion in the UK. Now, once you found it and made an offer, typically it could be 5 to 8 weeks process. It's a very intense process, particularly compared to the UK. You do a lot more legwork, and I would say probably overall stress is similar, but it's compressed down. So obviously it's a lot higher. So firstly, dealing with estate agents. So anyone can sell. It is a wild west out there. Liability is a total joke. Now, there's not much obligation for the seller to be transparent, and really you need to do your due diligence here. Hopefully your lawyer should be able to cover things that if there's anything nasty. Now, don't use any lawyer or notary that the agents recommend. They've obviously got vested interests. Use trusted contacts or people with very good reviews. Now, good properties move fast. It creates obviously a bit of a problem, because what I just said was that transparency is quite bad. So obviously you need to try and evaluate and balance speed, but also diligence. Typically, deposits on properties, there is this trend that's normally about 1% of the ticket price, or about 3K typically, to remove the property from the market and make sure that no one else can come in and snatch it. Now, these aren't necessary. If you're a serious cash buyer, for example, then you can just say, I want to go straight to RS. And if you want to sell it, let's go. So, but obviously, if you're in need of mortgage, if you need a little bit of lots of other areas, then maybe for your own security, you might want to go ahead with this and not fight it too much. If you are serious about buying it and you see a place you like, give the estate agent homework. This is always good. It also gives a reason to keep a constant dialogue with them. So ask for the nota simple, ask for the ITE, the cadastral reference, and then ask if it's an apartment building, are there any gastos de comunidad, which are service charges. Property search tips. So really just make sure you have multiple visits, especially at different times of the day. Obviously, areas and the lighting can make a big difference. Try and get a feeling for the neighborhood as well. There might be things that you spot in the nighttime that you don't notice in the daytime. Like maybe there's a loud nightclub, or maybe there's kids that hang around in an area. Also, check if there's any works that are planned nearby. It could be street works. It could be something that changes the view from the outside. If it's been recently redecorated, I would say proceed with caution. It can typically mean that someone's trying to either make a big profit by just flipping flats, by walloping them with white paint, or it could mean that they're hiding something. So I would much rather buy a old loved apartment from a grandmother than something that's been made white and fresh and new looking. Also, ask, why is it being sold? It could be that someone lost a family member and it's inheritance property, or it could be that someone's simply moving to a different city or a different country. But it's good to understand, because if it's an inheritance, and sometimes there can be battles by families, and it's really good to understand this. Maybe you don't want to get involved in a family feud. Also, everyone uses WhatsApp. It's probably the fastest way to book visits and communicate with the agents. So here I would definitely use it. Also, if your command of Spanish isn't so good, then it allows you to use Google Translate and this type of thing, and hopefully make fewer communication errors. Then in terms of search tools, so these are all websites. So the first four, Pisos, Ya Encontré, The Particulares, and Idealista. These three are simply just listing sites for properties. I'd recommend looking at only the most recent properties, particularly in cities where you can easily get overwhelmed with hundreds of properties. Also, a comment here is that people very rarely sign exclusivity contracts with a particular agent. This is a problem, because it means that you will constantly see the same property over and over again. And it's not deja vu, you're seeing it potentially 6 or 7 times. Ideally, if you or your partner has a particular type of memory, then I would assign them to filtering out the ones that you've seen before. I know I did with my partner. Another tool that we uncovered was Trophy Map. So in Spain, in the UK, there's Mouse Price, which allows you to compare and see the costs of properties in a certain postcode and get a feeling for the costs. In Spain, this information is hidden. However, with Trophy Map, what it allows you to do is you can upload details, square meters, number of bathrooms, number of bedrooms, whether it has a balcony or not, whether it has a car parking spot or not. And what it can do is it'll give you a price range, which this is really nice just to give you an idea of how much a certain property might cost. Then finally, I'm a commuter. I work outside of Barcelona. So to me, the commute time map was really valuable. Barcelona's got really excellent transport links. Obviously, other areas in Catalonia don't necessarily have good transport links. So it's a good idea to have an understanding of where can you get to using public transport. Particularly when there's multimodal transport, maybe catching a bus and then hitting a metro is more efficient. So this map really helps you understand that. So in terms of architectural due diligence, so you want the ITE. This is a technical building inspection report. This is to ensure the building is in condition. Normally, there will be recommendations at the end of the report for remedial works that need to happen. And normally, this is addressed to the community. So if it's part of a big building. And here, personally, I've received a ITE. There was an apartment I fell in love with. It was beautiful. It was old. It had all the right things. And because of it being old, of course, it had some hidden problems, particularly related to the concrete. So I had to back out, which was very unfortunate. But it's the way it is. You need to be prepared to walk away. Tried to avoid buildings that were constructed during recession years. This is where material quality really suffers. Also, just be wary if there's windows and doors open, particularly if you're in Barcelona. There's some buildings that suffer with sewerage smells. And if they've just blasted fresh air through the building, then this can obviously obscure these problems quite easily. Also, they don't have the concept of chartered surveyors so much in Spain. However, architects can fulfill this role. So if you do have any doubts, get in touch with an architect, get them to go and visit the property and highlight any problems. In terms of legal due diligence, so in terms of the checks that you should really make sure you do, make sure that the seller actually owns the property. This can happen, that they don't own the property. It sounds crazy, but stranger things have happened. Then make sure that you check the registry of the property, ensure that there's copies of the previous deed of sale, a copy of the cadastral, which you can download from having the cadastral reference and going online, any copies of bank guarantees, safe licenses of construction, endorsement certificates from the community, details of any planned community works. So this item is quite important, particularly because if you become a member of the community partway through works, then you'll have to foot part of the bill. So let's create an example. So maybe there's €100,000 repiping work in the building. Maybe some of it's already been paid, but not all of it. And you suddenly become the owner. Then suddenly part of that payment has to come from you. It's already been agreed by the community. So also make sure you get copies of meeting minutes from the community meetings, if it's a larger building, of course, an apartment. Here you can get a good idea on typical issues in the building as well. This is quite handy. Maybe there's a neighbour who's quite frustrating for everyone and you can already see it, or maybe it's that there's more serious issues, or it could be that you have a nice community. Also, from the legal perspective, checking if there's debts against the property itself. Obviously, if you buy the property and the debts are against that property, then unfortunately you'll be the proud new owner of a property with the debts. So you need to make sure that this is being foreseen. Now, just to give you an idea of the costs of buying. So we have the ETP. This is effectively a regressive flat rate tax, and it's 10% of the property ticket price. So for example, you buy something for 400k, you need to pay 40,000 euros in tax. Then the notario is about 2,200, 2,500, it could be in this region. The taxation, which is basically a evaluation report, that's around 300 to 500 euros, depending on the size of the property and where it is. And this is just an item to cover here, which is that from a cash flow perspective, if you're a British person who owned property in the UK and wanted to use that property to fund property in Spain, there is a mismatch between the 10% payment at the ARAS and actually selling the UK property. So it might be wise to delay buying a Spanish property until your British property has been sold, which can be difficult, but unless you have the money to be able to pay the ARAS, then you can end up in a tricky situation. Here, I take legal advice if you're unsure, or at least some sort of consultancy. So on the right-hand side, we just got a short worked example just to get an idea of how much cash in hand you need to purchase something. So here we're buying a nice little apartment for 350,000 euros, centre of Barcelona, and you need about 108,000 euros on hand to be able to handle this. So 10% of that, so 35k, would go onto your taxes. Then the notario fees would be around 3k. The ARAS, which will be 10% again, which the mortgage cannot help you with, or the hypotheca cannot help you with. And then finally the down payment on the hypotheca. Actually, in this assumption, the loan to value is 80%. The reason I say that is because the money from the ARAS goes together with the money with the down payment to make the kind of full down payment. So the ARAS is only temporarily sort of out of the loop. So what is ETP? So this is the Impuesto de Transmisiones Patrimoniales, and this is a 10% flat rate on the ticket price. The mortgage can't pay for it, so this is pretty tough, particularly if you come from the UK where stamp duty is a little bit less harsh. Now, there are ways to reduce this. There are a few special situations. I believe it's if you're classified as a large family, and also younger people can actually get it slightly less. So if you're under 33 years old, and if your last declaración de renta has a base imposable under 30,000 euros, then you can pay less. Admittedly, if you're buying property in Catalonia and you're under 33 and you're earning under 30k, it might be a bit tricky, but it is there, and there are certain scenarios where people can benefit. Once again, so there's a website at the bottom here, a link, which should give you more information. It's from the Catalan government, and it's much better. But yeah, this is an item that can be a bit tricky if you're young. So now on to the part that gave me the most sleepless nights. So the Contrato de Arras, and this private pre-purchase contract is just between you and the seller. This contract can really contain anything, as long as they agree, as long as both sides agree. And here it's sealed with the transfer of 10% of the purchasing price. So if we're buying a 300k property, 30k, and this is done through a bank transfer, which is a very scary process, I would say. Normally, you don't really handle the money, of course, in the UK, but here you do a lot more. So the ARAS is meant to make sure that both the buyer and seller have really bought into the sale. And basically, if you as the buyer were to back out, you lose that 10%. However, if the seller were to back out, they typically would need to pay you double back. And this is very typical. Normally, if you're applying for a hypotheca, a bank will want to see a signed ARAS agreement. You can really add anything. Some ideas for clauses that you probably want to have is maybe a surveyor type clause, that if a architect finds any hidden issues, then you can back out without any problems. It could be that you have a clause that states all taxes and charges have been paid on the property, which I would 100% recommend and always fight for, because you would be liable for them, particularly if it's an inheritance. Then you could pay someone else's inheritance tax, which is crazy, but make sure it's there. Make sure there's a clear date as well for the escritura. So for the completion, it could be that you say that you'll give a 10 days notice, for example, to the seller, to make sure that they'll be there and be there on the day to sign. An item that I forgot to include, because I got in the mire of legalese Spanish, was make sure the property is cleaned. Make sure there's a clause for this, because I forgot. And I had to clean some pretty nasty things on the day that I received the keys, which you live and you learn, and hopefully you can learn from my mistake. And then state any goods that you want as well. Maybe it's a washing machine, maybe it's a beautiful armchair. For me, it was a rocking chair. So just make sure you state anything that you want to keep. Otherwise, state that you want it empty. In Catalonia, you should have some protections. So, for example, because you do the arras before you have a mortgage in place. And in theory, in Catalonia, by default, if the banks don't give you a hipoteca, then you should get the money back. Some sellers do try to explicitly deny you this, but really push back, because this is an area that you really shouldn't accept. But if you do have any doubts here, just get a lawyer. It's easily the bit where I think some professionalism really helps. So if you do want a mortgage or hipoteca, so it's a 5-step process. So firstly, there's the application process. You need to provide documentation and details about the property that you want to buy. Then they'll assess you. Hopefully you'll get approved. And then there'll be the FAIN with a 15-day cooldown, at which point you can actually go to the signature, which that will happen on the day of the signing of the escritura. Just as a small amount of advice concerning hypothecas, so a 80% loan to value ratio is totally normal. There are some that are 90%, but just check, obviously the market changes. In Spain, they do have fijo, which is fixed. There is a bit of a mismatch between the UK concept of fixed and the Spanish concepts of fixed. In Spain, fixed means it's fixed for the entire term. So it's a 30-year fixed mortgage, for example. What we call fixed in the UK, Spain calls mixto. And then finally, there's variable, so variable. And banks do often try and suggest that mixto and variable are better because they can gain access to slightly more preferential rates. However, obviously, if you do lock in, you're locked in forever, which the peace of mind that can be gained here can be really quite beneficial. In terms of max monthly repayment, approximately 35% of your net household income is considered. And they will normally test this. It might be a little bit lower, a little bit higher. It really depends on what your situation is. Most banks will offer bonificaciones as well, bonuses, if you sign on to other products, and they'll give you effectively a beneficial interest rate. These are worth checking. Some of them are really innocuous, really small. It could just be moving your paycheck. That's what I had. That's what I'm really pleased with. It's a bonus that I can always ensure is okay. Sometimes, though, they combine it with life insurance, security camera policies, all sorts of things. And the thing is that these products, they might not be the best on the market and they might not be the best value. So you need to think, if someone's offering you the life insurance and it maybe saves you 200 euros a month, if that life insurance policy costs you more than 200 and it's not a great policy, maybe you don't want to do that. So there's a cost benefit analysis there. Of course, if you want an easy life, it really just depends on how much you want to negotiate and shop around. Also, a major difference in Spain is that humans are involved in the process at a much earlier stage. So if you do want to search for mortgages in the UK, of course, you could probably spend an evening and get a good few ideas on costs and what's going on. Whereas I'd say in Spain, you would submit your details, you'd think you're about to get a confirmation and get some numbers, and then it says, we'll call you back tomorrow, at which point it doesn't help. Particularly if you're working long hours, or maybe you're not able to answer your phone in the day, or maybe your command of Spanish isn't so good and you would much prefer something written. So this can be quite frustrating. And yeah, unfortunately, you will get spam called. And there's not much you can do about this, I don't think. Website I recommend is Rastreador. This is a comparison site, but it compares all the major companies' mortgages at once, and it's probably one of the better ones that I encountered. In terms of the application, you'll need some documentation. I recommend that you put these in a folder somewhere, and a digital folder, to be able to share fast. So what they probably want is a current rental contract, a copy of your TA, NIE passport, a copy of your vida laboral, which is a document you can take from the Spanish government website. This is effectively a Spanish history of your employment. Then a copy of your employment contract, assuming you're employed. Then 3 months of your paychecks, the last 6 months of your bank movements, just to make sure that there's no strange money coming in from somewhere. A copy of the nota simple, a signed copy of the ARAS agreement, a copy of the tasación, the evaluation. And then this is an item that happened to me, and it almost made everything go wrong, which is that at the last moment, the bank wanted a credit report to ensure that I had no debts in the UK. Now, this is something that I would recommend that you just get. It can take quite a while for credit reports to arrive, particularly because there's only 3 credit agencies in the UK. And if they can't find you, or you're not really on their books, then it can be quite tricky to get a copy of this report. It can take up to, I think it's 4 or 6 weeks even, for a credit report to arrive in the post. So this is something that, if you're serious about looking, get it done sooner rather than later. It shouldn't really cost anything, I don't think. But I don't know whether this is a Brexit item or particularly for my bank. This is one that is quite TBD, to be honest. Then, assuming they're happy, you get approved, then you can go to the FEIN. So the FEIN is a European standardized information pack on mortgage products. So it stands for the Ficha Europea de Información Normalizada. And what this is it's the equivalent of a lender's binding offer. There's a cool-down period in Catalonia, I believe it's 15 days. And it's time limited, meaning that it only has normally about 3 months where it's valid. During this time, the lender is compelled to give you a copy before signing the mortgage deed as well. So you've got records and you're able to read through it and really understand what's happening. At this point, you're into the final mile of purchasing. So this is where you select your own notario or notaria, and you have the right to choose. Obviously, can't stress this enough. Don't pick the ones that the agents recommend or a seller recommends. Pick your own, make sure they're independent, make sure they're good. Follow their instructions. They're really the master of this bureaucratic step. And they're there to really explain to you what the FEIN means. You need to understand what you're signing, and they will explain it. And if you don't understand, they'll explain it again. So, and they should answer any questions that you have. They are not there for diligence. They're there for the process. So this is something to bear in mind. So due diligence comes from lawyers and yourself, not from the notario. So just some key differences. There's no chartered surveyors like in the UK. If you need a second opinion, use an architect. And there isn't this concept of freehold and leasehold here, really. Apartments are all part of these communities. So some tips. In Spain, lowball. Don't go over the asking price. Definitely not. They can say no if you're too low. Just try and not be too offensive. The construction year really matters. Avoid the recession years because you avoid those poor quality materials. The notario is not for diligence. Your lawyer does this. Beforehand, because the mortgages don't come quite late until the process, just make sure that in an early stage, just have a conversation, ask them for effectively the equivalent of a mortgage illustration, and just saying, I just want to understand what I can borrow. And normally a bank can be quite handy, and they'll create some scenarios in which you buy a property, and then they can give you an idea of the costs. Use WhatsApp to talk with estate agents, get friendly with them. Sometimes they can show you properties that haven't arrived on the market online yet. And just don't be afraid to walk away. And of course, get a lawyer if you're uncertain about things, because otherwise you can be in a lot of trouble. So that said, here's a series of helpful links. I hope that this information has been worth your time and is able to help you in your purchasing. I won't necessarily be able to help everyone, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'll try and respond. No promises. My email is a.c.dickin@gmail.com. So yeah, thank you for the time, and really I just hope this can help you in some way. Okay, thank you very much.